we still see ourselves as human if other hominin species had not gone extinct? We know that 27,500 years ago, we had a super eruption in the North Island of Taupo in New Zealand, and after that was almost an extinction level event. Anthropologists believe that there was only 2,000 human couples left worldwide. We also had the comet impact about 12,000, 13,000 years ago that put an end to the Clovis culture and many other cultures across the world. This is by Nicholas Longridge, Senior Lecturer in Paleontology, Evolutionary Biology, University of Bath in the UK, on the conversation. And it says here, reader question, we know now from evolutionary science that humanity has existed in some form or another for around 2 million years or more. Homo sapiens are comparatively new on the block. There were also many other human species, some which were interbred with. The question is then inevitable, when can we claim personhood in the long story of evolution? Are chimpanzees people? Did Australopithecus have an afterlife? What are the implications for how we think about rights and religion? This is by Anthony A. MacIsaac, 26, Paris, France. In our mythologies, like today we were talking about the Cyclops, which were huge beings, the ones that had the one eye in the middle of the forehead, remember? And Ulysses did away with one of them. Anyway, that's the mythology of ancient Greece. In our mythologies, there's often a singular moment when we became human. Eve plucked the fruit of the tree of knowledge, gaining awareness of good and evil. Prometheus created men from clay and gave them fire. Finally, support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box. But in the modern origin history, evolution, there's no defining moment of creation. Instead, humans emerge gradually, generation by generation, from earlier species. Now, as with any other complex adaptation, a bird's wing, a whale's fluke, or our own fingers, our humanity evolved step by step over millions of years. Mutations appeared in our DNA, spread through the population, and our ancestors slowly became something more like us, and finally, we appeared. Strange apes, but still apes. People are animals, and we're unlike other animals. We have complex languages that let us articulate and communicate ideas. We're creative, we make art, music, tools, we even write. Our imaginations let us think up worlds that once existed, dream up worlds that might yet exist, and reorder the external world according to those thoughts. Our social lives are complex networks of families, friends, and tribes, linked by a sense of responsibility towards each other. We also have awareness of ourselves and our universe, sentience, sapience, consciousness, whatever you call it. And yet the distinction between ourselves and other animals is arguably artificial. Animals are more like humans than we might think or like to think. Almost all behavior we once considered unique to ourselves are seen in animals, even if they're less well developed. Now, there's especially true of the great apes. Chimps, for example, have simple gestural and verbal communication. They make crude tools, even weapons, and different groups have different suits of tools, distinct cultures. Chimps also have complex social lives and cooperate with each other. As Darwin noted in Descent of Man, almost everything odd about Homo sapiens, emotional, cognition, language, tools, society, exists in some primitive form in other animals. We're different, but less different than we think. And in the past, some species were far more like us than other apes. Ardipithecus, Australopithecus, Homo erectus, and Neanderthals. Homo sapiens is the only survivor of a once diverse group of humans and human-like apes, the hominins, which includes around 20 known species, 20, and probably dozens of unknown species. The extinction of those hominins wiped out all the species that were intermediate between ourselves and the other apes, creating the impression that some vast unbridged gulf separates us from the rest of life on Earth. But the division would be far less clear if those species still existed. What looks like a bright, sharp dividing line is really an artifact of extinction. The discovery of these extinct species now blurs that line again and shows how the distance between us and other animals was crossed gradually over millennia. The evolution of humanity? Our lineage probably split from the chimpanzees around 6 million years ago. These first hominin members of the human line would barely have seemed human, though. For the first few million years, hominin evolution was slow. The first big change was walking upright, which let hominins move away from forests into more open grassland and bushes. But if they walked like us, nothing else suggests the first hominins were any more human than chimps or gorillas. Ardipithecus, the earliest well-known hominin, had a brain that was slightly smaller than the chimps, and there's no evidence they used tools. In the next million years, Australopithecus appeared, and Australopithecus had a slightly larger brain, larger than the chimps, still smaller than the gorillas. It made slightly more sophisticated tools than chimps, using sharp stones to butcher animals. Then came Homo habilis. For the first time, hominin brain size exceeded that of other apes. Tools, stone flakes, hammer stones, and choppers became much more complex. After that, around 2 million years ago, human evolution accelerated for reasons we yet do not understand. Something happened 2 million years ago. Big brains? At this point, Homo erectus appeared. Erectus was taller, more like us in stature, and had large brains, several times bigger than a chimp's brain, and up to 2/3 the size of ours. They made sophisticated tools such as stone hand axes. This was a major technological advance. A hand axe needed skill and planning as to how to create it, so it doesn't fall apart when you're using it, of course. How to create it, you probably had to be taught how to make one. It may have been a meta tool used to fashion other tools such as spears and digging sticks as well. Now, like us, Homo erectus had small teeth. That suggests a shift from plant-based diets to eating more meat, probably from hunting. It's here that our evolution seems to accelerate. The big-brained erectus soon gave rise to even larger-brained species. These highly intelligent hominins spread through Africa and Eurasia, evolving into Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo rhodesiensis, and archaic Homo sapiens. Technology became far more advanced. Stone-tipped spears and fire-making appeared. Objects with no clear functionality, such as jewelry and art, also showed up over the past 500,000 years. Some of these species were startlingly like us in their skeletons and their DNA. Homo neanderthalensis, the Neanderthals, had brains approaching ours in size, and evolved even larger brains over time, until the last Neanderthals had cranial capacities comparable to the modern humans. They might have thought of themselves, even spoke of themselves, as human. The Neanderthal archaeological record records uniquely human behavior, suggesting a mind resembling ours. Neanderthals were skilled, versatile hunters, exploiting everything from rabbits to rhinoceroses and woolly mammoths. They made sophisticated tools such as throwing spears tipped with stone points. They fashioned jewelry from shells, animal teeth, and eagle talons, and made cave art. And Neanderthal ears were, like ours, adapted to hearing the subtleties of speech. We know they buried their dead and probably moored them as well, but there's so much about Neanderthals we don't know, and never will. But if they were so like us in their skeletons and their behavior, it's reasonable to guess that they may have been like us in other ways that don't leave a record. That they sang and danced, and they feared spirits and worshipped gods, that they wandered at the stars, told stories, laughed with friends, and loved their children. To the extent Neanderthals were like us, they must have been capable of acts of great kindness and empathy, but also cruelty, violence, and deceit. Far less is known about other species, like the Denisovans, the Homo rhodesiensis, and extinct sapiens. but it's reasonable to guess from their large brains and human-looking skulls that they were also very much like ours. What about love and war? I admit this sounds speculative, but for one detail, the DNA of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other hominins is found in us. We met them and we had children together. That says a lot about how human they were. It's not impossible that Homo sapiens took Neanderthal women captive or vice versa, but for Neanderthal genes to enter our populations, we had to not only mate, but successfully raise children who grew up to raise children of their own. And that's more likely to happen if these pairings resulted from voluntary intermarriage. Mixing of genes also required their hybrid descendants to become accepted into their groups to be treated as fully human. These arguments hold not only for the Neanderthals, I'd argue, but for other species we interbred with, including Denisovans and unknown hominins in Africa, which is not to say that encounters between our species were without prejudice or entirely peaceful. We were probably responsible for the extinction of these species, but there must have been times we looked past our differences to find a shared humanity. Of course, this article doesn't talk about the supervolcanic eruptions and extinction level events, or, for example, the Clovis comet, the Younger Dryas comet, that impacted Earth about 13,000 years ago. So finally, he says it's telling that while we did replace these other hominins, this took time. Extinction of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other species took hundreds of thousands of years. If Neanderthals and Denisovans were really just stupid, grunting brutes lacking language or complex thought, it's impossible they could have held modern humans off as long as they did. The human edge, why, if they were so like us, did we replace them? It's unclear, which suggests the difference was something that does not leave clear marks in fossil or stone tools. Perhaps a spark of creativity, a way with words, a knack for tools, social skills, gave us an edge. Whatever the difference was, it was subtle, or it would not have taken us so long to win out. While we don't know exactly what these differences were, our distinctive skull shape may offer a clue. Neanderthals had elongated crania with massive brow ridges. Humans have a bulbous skull shaped like a soccer ball and lack brow ridges. Curiously, the peculiar smooth round head of adult Homo sapiens is seen in young Neanderthals and even baby apes. Similarly, juvenilized skulls of wild animals are found in domesticated ones like domestic dogs. An adult dog skull resembles the skull of a wolf pup. These similarities aren't just superficial. Dogs are behaviorally like young wolves, less aggressive and more playful. My suspicion, mostly a hunch, is that Homo sapiens' edge might not necessarily be raw intelligence, but differences in attitude, and like dogs, we may retain juvenile behaviors, things like playfulness, openness to meeting new people, lower aggression, more creativity, and curiosity. And this in turn might have helped us make our societies larger and more complex, collaborative, open, and innovative, which then outcompeted theirs. But what is it? Until now, I've dodged an important question, arguably the most important one. It's all well and good to discuss how our humanity evolved, but what even is humanity? How can we study and recognize it without defining it? People tend to assume that there's something that makes us fundamentally different from other animals. Most people, for example, would tend to think that it's okay to sell, cook, or eat a cow, but not to do the same to the butcher, and this would be, well, inhuman. As a society, we tolerate displaying chimps and gorillas in cages, but would be uncomfortable doing this to each other. Similarly, we can go to a shop and buy a puppy or a kitten, but not, of course, a small child. Now, the rules are different for us and them. Even die-hard animal rights activists advocate animal rights for animals, not human rights. No one is proposing giving apes the right to vote or stand for office. We inherently see ourselves as occupying a different moral and spiritual plane. We might bury our dead pet, but we would not expect the dog's ghost to haunt us or to find the cat waiting in heaven. And yet it's hard to find evidence for this kind of fundamental difference. The word humanity implies taking care of and having compassion for each other, but that's arguably a mammalian quality, not a human one. A mother cat cares for her kittens, and a dog loves his master, perhaps more than any human does. Killer whales and elephants form different lifelong family bonds. Orcas grieve for their dead calves, and elephants have been seen visiting the remains of their dead companions. Emotional lives and relationships are not unique to us. Perhaps it's awareness that sets us apart. But dogs and cats certainly seem aware of us. They recognize us as individuals as we recognize them. They understand us well enough to know how to get us to give them food or to let them out the door, or even when they've had a bad day and need company. And if that's not awareness, what is? We might point to our large brains as setting us apart, but does that make us human? Bottlenose dolphins have somewhat larger brains than we do. Elephant brains are 3 times the size of ours. Orcas 4 times bigger, and sperm whales 5 times bigger. Brain size also varies in humans. Albert Einstein had a relatively small brain, smaller than the average Neanderthal, Denisovan, or Homo rhodesiensis. Was he less human? Something other than brain size makes us human, or maybe there's more going on in the minds of other animals, including these extinct hominins, than we think. We could define humanity in terms of higher cognitive abilities, art, math, music, language. This creates a curious problem because humans vary in how well we do all these things. I'm less mathematically inclined than Stephen Hawking, less literally than Jane Austen, less inventive than Steve Jobs, less musical than Taylor Swift, less articulate than Martin Luther King. In these respects, am I less human than they are? If we can't even define it, how can we really say where it starts and where it ends, or that's where we are unique? Why do we insist on treating other species as inherently inferior if we're not exactly sure what makes us us? Neither are we necessarily the logical endpoint of human evolution. We were one of many hominin species, and yes, we won out, but it's impossible to imagine another evolutionary course, a different sequence of mutations and historical events leading to Neanderthal archaeologists studying our strange, bulb-like skulls, wondering just how human we are. The nature of evolution means that living things don't fit into neat categories. Species gradually change from one into another, and every individual in a species is slightly different. That makes evolutionary change possible, but that makes defining humanity hard. We're both unlike other animals due to natural selection, but like them because of shared ancestry, the same yet different. And we humans are both like and unlike each other, united by common ancestry with other Homo sapiens, different due to evolution and the unique combination of genes we inherit from our families or even our other species, such as Neanderthals and Denisovans. It's hard to classify living things in strict categories because evolution constantly changes things, creating diverse species and diversity within species. And what diversity it is. True, in some ways, our species is not that diverse. Homo sapiens show less genetic diversity than our average bacterial strain. Our bodies show less variation in shape than sponges, or roses, or oak trees, but in our behavior, humanity is widely diverse. We are hunters, farmers, mathematicians, soldiers, explorers, carpenters, criminals, artists. There are so many different ways of being human, so many different aspects to the human condition, and each of us has to define and discover what it means to be human. It is, ironically, this inability to define humanity that is one of our most human characteristics. This is on The Conversation by Nicholas Roglin, Senior Lecturer, Paleontology and Evolutionary Biology, University of Bath, and its Creative Commons. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support.